Hey folks, it's Marvin Cash, the host of The Articulate Fly, and we're back with another Central Virginia fishing report with Ethan Martin at TaleTellers Fly Shop. How you doing, Ethan?
I'm doing great today. How you doing today?
I can't complain, just trying to stay out of trouble. Checked the weather before I got on with you, and with the exception of whatever the hurricane gives you, things look pretty good in your neck of the woods.
Yeah, it's been pretty much the seasonal fall weather pattern. So the fishing has been pretty normal, with every year. So it's been pretty nice, Brook trout, we've seen, I still haven't seen any that are like actively spawning, but I'm sure by now, some of them somewhere are starting to dance up there. And then, everything else, smallmouth have been moving on to the holes. What else have we been doing? Striper. I did some striper in Sith Mountain Lake. That was kind of an eye-opening experience because I caught a pretty nice one. And then we're all on shad, which is just like what you pretty much would expect during the fall. And then muskie are still, staying elusive. So everything's doing what it should be doing.
Yeah, the muskie are practicing for December, January, and February. So,
exactly.
Yeah, so if we break it down a little bit, obviously the trout fishing is going to be pretty good, and assuming you don't get blown out, things should be pretty good. I assume as things are cooling off, though, the fish are starting to basically prefer nymphs over dry flies, right?
Yes, yeah, you're spot on with that one. It's been, the past month has been a pretty obvious difference in that smaller dry flies have been working, but the vast majority of the fish are eating that either like a really small streamer or a nymph pattern. So what we've been noticing too has been there's a kind of a difference in where you're fishing. So if you're fishing a place that's stock trout, the nymphs that they're going to be primarily focusing on are going to be more of an attractor style pattern. If you're fishing a stream where it's primarily wild fish, just like you would normally expect, those fish are going to respond better to a more natural style presentation. Of course, you can still use attractor style stuff. Like this time of the year, an egg is going to be fine wherever you're going, because there's a lot of fish species, not just trout, that do spawn some in the fall. So, that like something like a little egg, 1 minute egg or micro egg or something like that is going to find you fish, or smaller streamers, like I said, because your bait fish are slowly going to start getting a little bit bigger. So like woolly buggers, some of the classic stuff is going to be things that those fish will key in on as we get temperature changes. Because really that's what, there's 2 or 3 factors on, but temperature change and then the light change are going to be 2 of the biggest things that are causing these fish to think, okay, winter is coming. So either, for brook trout or browns, we're going to start spawning, or for all other species, including, brook trout and browns, once they're out of the spawn, it's going to be eating, getting prepared for winter, just like, a bear or anything like that does.
Yeah, and then I guess to kind of shift gears to smallmouth, I guess what you're seeing, right, is probably moving towards wintering holes, not quite there yet, but definitely probably more of a streamer bite now than it has been.
Yep. Yeah, it's been somewhat inconsistent there on the smallmouth front. Like I was telling you before we started recording, we did a musky float yesterday in really clear conditions and low water as well. And we didn't really see any smallmouth. Well, I say we didn't see a smallmouth until the end of the day when we pulled into one of the smaller creeks and we saw 2 or 3 9-inch smallmouth bass and a bluegill. So it's one of those things where if you want to continue fishing for smallmouth, that's really what it's going to boil down to. It's just subsurface, streamers, or just taking a crawdad across the bottom. We've got here in Virginia, our growing seasons are a little different than places like Michigan or Minnesota, where those fish are going to be crazy aggressive for this last little bit. Or maybe not crazy aggressive is not the proper term, but our fish aren't going to become as aggressive towards stuff. So you're just going to have to dead drift a streamer or take a clawdad or something like that in front of the fish's face for them to want to actually eat it. So it's definitely still doable, and it's cool to do it just to learn to become a better angler. But it's not a high numbers game doing that until you find a pot of fish, and then you can catch quite a few once you learn where their wintering holes are. It's just all about learning that, and like I said, or like you said, it's still transitioning into that phase, right? So we're not quite there yet, but they are progressing towards that.
Well, that's super helpful, and we've got a great question from Brian. Brian is a new COVID recruitee to fly fishing, and he's been chasing brook trout, and he's been using an 8.5 foot 4-weight, and he feels like he's overpowering the fish, and he's kind of wondering if he were to drop the coin to get a 6 foot 2-weight, would he have a better feel, and would it be easier for him to cast into tighter spots?
Yeah, so that's a great question. A lot of this is going to boil down to preference, because you're going to have people from both sides of camps that'll say two different things. Ultimately, some of this is going to boil down to the waters that you fish. So if the waters that you're fishing are larger, even the brook trout might be the same size, but if you have more room to cast, like if you are able to properly cast that 4-weight 8.5 foot rod, then you're fine. It's not something that you have to be worrying about in terms of overpowering it. If you are in a lot smaller streams and you've got cover all around you, then it might be profitable to go down to something like a 2-weight 6 foot. Now the things within that some people don't think about is, finding fish on a 2-weight is a lot of fun. That's just the way it is. It bends really well. You can cast it really easily. The downsides of a 2-weight that probably aren't as well known are your casting becomes more laborious, and within that is it's more difficult to cast in wind. So if you are going out in the winter or like early spring where, we can get a fair amount of wind in some of these small streams, not always, but it does happen. It's more difficult to control where the fly is going to go because you don't have the mass to really punch through the wind. Now, again, that's not something that you have to think about all the time, because it's not super common that you go up to places and it's like, roaring winds and craziness. So a lot of it, what it's going to boil down to is just your preference. I mean, if you want to try it and you feel like it would be helpful to you, then I would just say try it. I mean, you can probably take the same reel that's on your 4-weight, and then you can get a 2-weight or a 3-weight line and put it on the 2-weight, and you'll do just fine. You'll be able to cast into there. But another option could be, which a lot of people have been going to, is fiberglass rods. Because if you did like a fiberglass 3-weight, that's going to get you the bend that you want. Because it sounds like, just judging from the way that the question's written, it's not as much a problem of casting as much as it is just overpowering the fish, which to me makes it sound like the rod's not bending enough for you. Or like, in other words, you are feeling like you're basically just yanking these things out of the water and they're flying at you and you snag them in the air, rather than, you set the hook and the fish remains in the water. To me, that's kind of what it sounds like. You want to be able to basically fight these little 3-inch to 8-inch fish. So what probably would be a good option would be, like you said, a 2-weight 6-foot rod is going to be the same sort of dynamic, or you could do like a 3-weight fiberglass rod that's in that 7 foot to 7.5 foot range. And that gets you a little bit shorter. You still have the strength to punch through the wind. And you're still going to be able to fight and play those fish. So there's a couple of options. All I just did was muddy it up by adding a third choice, but that is the reality. A lot of it boils down to preference, and probably the best thing you could do would be if you wanted to just come into whatever shop is local to you and ask them to cast a couple of rods and see which one you like casting the most, and go from that route. That would be what I would mainly suggest, is just doing that. Most shops probably have fiberglass options. If they're near brook trout streams, they probably have a 2-weight 6-foot. I know we've got them here. But yeah, it just depends on what you want to do rather than just, hearing me talk about it, where are you actually fishing? And I would go through that vein, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's a super complicated question because it kind of, if you ask 2 anglers, they'll give you 4 different answers.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And so
and then you've got Tenkara angler guys that they want to take a 10-foot or 12-foot rod up on some of these small streams, and they're perfectly fine just damping the fly. And some people aren't all about that. They want the shorter stick. They don't want to have to worry about whacking it against a tree or anything like that. So, like I said, a lot of it is going to boil down to the preference,
Yeah, it's tough, right? Because the longer rod lets you manage line more easily, which is the kind of the trade-off, on the shorter stick. And then, I'll do my part to muddy things up and say, the other thing to do is I think, particularly when you're fishing in tight cover, the biggest mistake you can do is getting that fly line in the air, right?
Yep.
So a lot of it is kind of independent of your rod length, is really kind of becoming better at roll casting and bow and arrow casting and doing things that are not that beautiful river runs through it cast.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I always tell people that just get closer, whatever you're trying to get to cast to, you just always get closer because in that way, less is more. The only thing you can do wrong then is spook a fish. And the benefits definitely outweigh that because you actually can catch more fish if you get closer. So
yeah,
that's one of my always the tips that I try to leave people with is get closer to whatever you're casting to.
Well, and the great thing too is on these little wild streams, the water's pretty shallow, so the fish has a pretty small window of vision anyway.
Yep. Yeah. And so that's one of the other things with the small streams I always tell people is you get closer and just, you do it, pretty smooth, but not too fast. Cause I think this is one of my personal opinions that, we develop over time, but I don't think that, you could wear a super bright color and that spook a trout. Cause I wear blaze orange hats to make sure I don't get my head blown off when I'm in the national forest during hunting season. And you still find fish and they don't spook. So I think a lot of it has more to do with really sudden movements that spook them more so than color. Now, if you're wearing a blaze orange vest and you're running through the woods, yeah, you're going to spook them maybe ultra fast. But, I haven't had a problem, wearing a bright color, slowly approaching the pool or from wherever you're approaching from and then casting the fish. So that's just one of those things that, it all trickles together, the right rod, the right distance from the pool, approaching the right way, all that stuff is going to help you become a better angler. And a lot of that is going to come through time. If somebody just gets into fly fishing, you're not going to do everything right, the first million trips. So it takes time, to get your preferences down and to see what works best for you and what works best for the rivers that you're fishing. So I wouldn't put too much pressure on trying to find all of the perfect equipment in your first 6 months of fishing.
Yeah, there you go. Well, listen, folks, we love questions on the articulate fly. If you'll email them to us or shoot them to us on our Facebook or Instagram page, if we use your question, I'll send you some articulate fly swag. And Ethan, if you win the drawing at the end of the season, we'll send you something cool from the shop. And before I let you hop, Ethan, why don't you let folks know where they can find you, the shop hours, and all that kind of good stuff?
Yeah, the easiest place to find me is in the shop, which is in downtown Lynchburg, Virginia. So we're located on Commerce Street, and there's a lot of stuff to do here. So, you can make a good weekend trip out of it and come hang out with me on Saturday. Or if you can't make it to the shop, you can find us online at TaleTellers VA, and pretty much all of the inventory that's in the shop can be found online. So if there's something that you're looking for, you can go that route and just, look online or shoot me an email, and I can send you links to the fly patterns or whatever it is that you might be wanting to tie or make. And then, of course, Instagram, Facebook, we've got those stuff as well, which is TaleTellers Fly Shop or TaleTellers VA. So either way, you'll be able to find us and connect with us and shoot me the nasty hate mail or whatever.
Well, there you go. Well, listen, folks, you need to go fish now, because when it's January and February, you're going to really regret not getting out. Get out and catch a few, everybody. Tight lines, Ethan.
Tight lines.